let's do the introduction to the panelists, and then we'll get right into the discussion. So as we all know, in the past year, adoption of CTV services and platforms has accelerated because people needed more content, more access virtually, and cord cutting has accelerated part and parcel with that. But along with that, a lot of subscription video on demand services have also accelerated. You know, something Steve didn't show in his forecast was a recent report that came out from PQ Media. And if I was running a slide presentation now, I'd pull that chart up. But it's what I alluded to earlier, that the percentage of media being supported by advertising versus being supported by consumers accelerated again in 2020, and it's predicted to accelerate even further in 2021 by PQ Media. And the reason for that is pretty obvious, that point, that a lot more of the eyeballs that would have gone to ad-supported free over-the-air or cable subscription television just is switching over to non-ad supported media. So with that context in mind, I mean, the good news is we have an hour more of media usage going on average this year, so that's good. So what we've done is we've assembled a panel of leading experts, and what I'll do now is introduce them. So we have Gibbs Haljun, who is the total investment lead for GroupM's Mindshare, also coincidentally MediaPost Agency of the Year for 2 years in a row now. And he leads one of the biggest video investment groups in the world. Then we have Melissa Sierra, Senior Vice President, Group Strategy Director of USIM. So again, like kind of the other side of the picture here, a very much more independent agency, much more local focus, regional, different perspective on the TV and video marketplace. And then we have Brad, and by the way, last year's Independent Agency of the Year. So then finally, we have Brad Stockton, who is Vice President of Video Innovation at Dentsu, which is our agency holding company of the year. So we have an all-star panel here to get into the discussion. So I hope you're all comfortable with the interface. I'm going to open up with kind of a general question. I mean, the goal here is really to talk about supply and demand dynamics that are going in the year ahead for all the media that we talk about here. So for CTV in particular, I'd first like you to frame it for me. Like, what do you think of when we talk about the CTV market? Is it a distinct, disparate market from television and video and programmatic and VOD and all those other things we're talking about? Or is it part of an integrated strategy on your half? And then lastly, in your opening response, if you could also talk about how you see it shaping up for the year ahead. And that should get us into a good framework for the conversation. So if you don't mind, we'll do it alphabetically. If Gibbs can start off by giving us your sense on how do you at Mindshare cluster or organize CTV in the media planning matrix, and how do you see it benefiting or not this year ahead?
Yeah, thanks. So the opportunity with CTV is obviously there. It is a huge mass scale, but that's when you aggregate everything up. And so I think that's one of the things that makes it benefit. You can use it for lots of different things. You know, you can use it for local, you can use it for geo-targeting, you can use it for mass reach, you can use it for response metrics, you can use it addressable. There, you know, it is a great opportunity to use digital-like measurement in a TV-like environment and a TV-like world. The challenge, obviously, with it is that there are lots of different platforms and there are lots of different opportunities. So I can buy it on a programmatic platform, I can buy it, you know, on a direct IO, I can buy it through NBC. And so what you end up having is lots of different swim lanes, lots of different like sort of cross-pollination. And in some cases, you don't necessarily have all the different transparency that you want, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And so I think it's great because it can do everything, but I think it's also a challenge because it can do everything. And that makes it, you know, a interesting environment to dabble in.
So it's a little bit of a performance medium, a little bit of a DR medium, a little bit of a branding medium. But can you tell me, do you look at it as part of an integrated whole with your TV video strategy, or is it a distinct media channel that you're planning for?
It's going to be both. You know, if I'm going to do it in an addressable way or performance, it will be a distinct channel. If I'm looking at it as a reach building vehicle, it is going to be part of a, you know, sort of overall reach video campaign. I think, you know, the other thing that makes it interesting is it is not one thing. And what I mean by that is Hulu, Roku are considered, Roku is clearly CTV. Hulu is FEP online video, but also, so many of their impressions are coming from CTV. So it's this hybrid sort of approach, which then means that everybody's approaching it from a hybrid standpoint, and it can do, as I said earlier, lots of things.
Okay. I'd love to probe on that, but we are in Zoom, so we should get other points of view here. But it sounds to me like it's a very fungible medium, and that's one of my frustrations. So Melissa, can you describe how you think, how you organize CTV in your strategy and planning, and what do you see the outlook for this year, generally speaking?
Yeah, absolutely. So while majority of the advertising budgets are still skewed toward linear TV, CTV certainly affords our clients to be complementary to those linear campaigns, and particularly on a local level too, where we need to get into the need states and values of those particular market areas. Even with the shift in demand that's happening with CTV, we're seeing that local news engagement as at its prime key. With the pandemic, with also the socioeconomic culture that's going on and other things that are occurring within our state of being, viewership is up, and it's up amongst young, diverse audiences. In fact, Nielsen was saying that 18 to 34 has been growing their total TV news consumption by 134% last year versus, 2019 versus 2020. So we definitely can't dispel what has been going on with the news consumption around younger audiences too, who primarily were going to social media channels for their news and their active involvement. And I think that's a trend here to stay. So to the more that we can speak to performance metrics, testing branding against direct response initiatives, and also hacking for those individualistic market conditions as well during the pandemic and coming out of it, I think we'll be better off as marketers too. So before there was an intent to use data to inform buying decisions, but more and more, I think the planning side, as well as coupled with the messaging and having distinct notations around that and really enveloping what that means to your particular customers is going to be paramount.
Okay, so I heard a little bit of follow the eyeballs, and I also heard a little bit of similar to Gibbs in the sense that you're thinking of this tactically. How do you use it for a specific client in a specific scenario? So Brad, if we could go on to your orientation, how do you think of CTV? Is it similar to the way the other speakers think about it, or do you have a different point of view on that?
No, I mean, it's quite similar. I mean, I think Gibbs and Melissa did a really good job summing up how the opportunities are for clients. And the truth is, CTV is not new. It's booming. It's been around for a long time, right? And now that we're starting to see more eyeballs go there, the internet streams are stronger. You're not sitting on a load bar the entire time. So it's really about the consumers at the end of the day. And no matter which way you chalk this up, it's always about the consumers. Advertisers don't choose what medium is going to pop. The consumers are going to go there. And that's where we have to make sure that we can find our best ways. How do you activate it? How do you navigate it? And how do you get the appropriate measurement to complement where you're putting your dollars? Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure everything is held accountable, whether it's linear television and upskilling that to be properly measurable, or if it's in the connected TV space, but being able to connect the dots across the different channels. That's the core element to this, to all of this, is that cross-platform measurement piece. And I think Gibbs did a really nice job of saying where it can be that mass awareness player, because we now hit critical mass. We are at a place where you can reach a lot of eyeballs on 18 to 49 in age and gender, but you can really get further down that funnel. It's digital in nature. We are able to utilize targeting capabilities and really understand that measurement. Did they take the action after the step? And that's what the beautiful thing of connected TV really brings, both that linear experience, but also that measurement experience, and really collides together.
Okay, so what I heard from all of you is actually a really strong reaffirming point of view from me, because when I started covering TV in the 80s, that's when cable came on stream and syndication and unwired networks. And it took a long time for them to get on base with agencies because there was a lot of what box does it fit into? And it seems like we've moved way past that, which is a good thing. But I will say what I'm asking you all is it kind of an inflection point? Back in the 80s, it was Ted Bates' 5% solution that got cable on the budget. There's nothing like that going on here, but I would think in 2020, with consumer behavior adopting the medium so much, that you guys would be way, way leaning into this. But it sounds to me like it's just part of a matrix. Did I get that right from all of you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's definitely part of a matrix. I think, the challenge in some cases is building that scale together. And that, I think Melissa said it really well, in that, you have a lot of context, so you can go very targeted on to very connected opportunities in a very specific mindset, whether it is the, Red Bull TV app for like adventure versus, a YouTube app versus, general entertainment content on Roku. And I think that is, going back to sort of the swim lanes, you can be very targeted, you can be very granular, you can be very broad. And I think that is where it plays well, but I think it also makes it that, complex matrix.
Yeah,
And-
2020 was all about testing for us, the different platforms that were out there, parallel tracking brand awareness with e-commerce sales or app downloads, really playing and understanding where our brands fit in this space and what consumers want of us within this experience. We also are trying to make strides within the industry around frequency capping too. So it's not just increasing the budgets because that's where the demand and the eyeballs are. It's also taking into account what that consumer experience is, to what Brad and Gibbs had pointed out, to making sure that the context, the relevancy is there, and that we're delivering deliberate experiences for those consumers.
Okay, so I think you all did a good job of framing it and explaining what the advantages are, how you use it. I'd like to talk a little bit about how it differs from linear TV or digital cable TV or other media that you bought before. And I think Gibbs alluded to it in the data, and to a certain extent you did too, Melissa, which is, there's an ability here to understand, look, that my ACR device behind me is listening to everything we're saying right now. I never turn that default off. Now, I don't think that data is going to be used in any constructive way, but the point is, this technology knows more about people than the dumb TV sets of the past did. Just this week, we reported on Mindshare, a very leading edge move, created a ethics compass to help its agencies, its teams, and its clients understand how and when to use media data ethically. And I think you should read that article. There are other articles about it, but I think it's a starting point for a conversation in the industry, which is, have we gone too far with this ability? Melissa, we've written a lot about how USIM has done some amazing things in terms of using opt-in, non-identifiable user data on location, where you can now track where people are moving in real time to retail locations and then target them through CTV devices. It's remarkable. I mean, that's so much more advantageous than TV targeting. But the question I have for all of you is, are we going to start to see a backlash? We've already seen tremendous amounts of regulation, self-regulation going on with conventional digital. Are we going to see a backlash with CTV?
Oh, sorry. Honestly, I think the reality is, and that's Zoom for you. I think the reality is, consumers like to have curated ads to them. They want to see that things that are relevant to them. The consumer experience is enhanced when you're seeing ads that are relative to you. So I think that's a core element to this. I think when you just think about the original, what you keep it up, like how is this different linear TV and digital and connected TV and where it fits. Connected TV is that one-to-one experience because it's digital in nature. So being able to serve those ads differently than linear television, which is that one-to-many, really is going to enhance the experience to say, well, let's deliver the right ad to the right person at the right time. Of course, let's always stay privacy compliant. That's the core at everything. And that we always want to make sure that is the first thing. But whether it's to bring your own data to the party to make sure you're reaching the right people with the right ads, so your dollars are working harder for you and smarter, that's going to be one component. If it's about contextual alignment, making sure you're being around the right environments, we have those capabilities of doing that in the connected TV space. So really, it depends on where you are as a client, what is the main KPI you're trying to achieve, and making sure that we don't lose the context and the content of where we're airing, but it's still going to be focused around, let's use data where we can and just give the best consumer experience. And I think that's really the net when it comes, especially within the connected TV space.
And I think, Joe, you talked a little bit about it. The poll sort of talked a little bit about it in terms of cord cutting and things like that. And I think cord cutting will continue. I don't think it's going to get to be 50% because I think that there is a cost value relationship that comes into play. That, broadband providers are going to allow people to keep TV at a limited cost, or at least, from that standpoint. But I think that, their consumers are going to opt in. They're going to opt in to more advanced targeting elements to, what Brad and Melissa said, in exchange for lower cost. So, you know what, you can get a lower, subscription to something because we're going to do some data targeting on the back end. And I think, particularly if you talk to any of the younger generation, they're signing away everything in order to get the Spotify's or the TikToks or whatever the latest app thing is. Nobody's reading these 17-page disclosure documents before they sign up. They're just writing their name down for the credit card.
Yeah. And I think if the industry continues with a lot more privacy regulations, then we're driven back to more mass audiences, and it sort of starts to weaken the appeal of CTV, right? So to Brad and Gibbs' point about it being more personalized to me and what I want to see, it loses its luster and its appeal to the consumers, what they're wanting to pay for that content exchange and that valuation. And I think then you're cutting off your nose to spite your face, so to speak, in terms of the lifetime value of that customer.
Okay. So I guess I'm wrong about the potential backlash here, but I think keep an eye on this because I think the power of that targeting, Gibbs gave a good example where there's a rewards mechanic associated with giving your data up. But I know that Mindshare also has this ick factor in its new Compass tool. And I think if people are following me through M4 data and I know I went to a Kroger's and I come back home and on my TV, there's an offer for that product I almost bought, I think people are going to react, and you're going to see that down the road, maybe not this year. But right now, it's a very powerful targeting medium, superior in a lot of ways to linear TV. So again, this is topical. I just saw this story move on MediaPost, so I'm not hoodwinking you here, but my colleague Wayne Friedman just wrote a story about a new Double Verify report that found the second example of CTV ad fraud in just a couple of months. This one is estimated, it's called the Parrot Terror exploit. And this one spoofed about, millions of devices, and its value is estimated $30 to $50 million worth of ad fraud. That follows a previous exploit that had about $15 million of advertising value. So we're starting to see this creepy ad fraud exploit going on that we saw in conventional digital. Is that giving you any pause for CTV going forward? And what protocols do you put in place to manage that?
I'll jump in quickly on this. Look, we are, any place where you're dealing with technology, there is going to be people who try to game the system or game the technology to try to do that. I think, it would, and I haven't read Wayne's article, so I don't know any of the specifics, but you got to know what you're buying. And I think this is one of the things that makes it harder. And I'm not picking on CTV, I'm not picking on any of the programmatic platforms, whatever. But if you go through line item by line item of some of the programmatic and auction bids where, you're buying hundreds of thousands of sites, there needs to be a culling of, not just sort of inclusion and exclusion lists, but do I really need to buy, tens of thousands of sites or tens of thousands of apps? And that if you're not paying attention to, in some cases, the detail that you're looking at, that's gonna permeate. It's not like we're having that experience on, well-rounded, large scale apps like, Peacock, things like that are not, in that platform. If you're going down and buying CTV through an exchange and then they're buying it through another exchange, yes, you're going to end up in that sort of environment, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, that's spot on, right? I mean, Gibbs, you said so well, know where you have the opportunity to air, right? I mean, this device spoofing is not net new. We saw this with Ice Bucket. This is just another occurrence of it. But, there's certain partners that you can't device spoof. And there's certain things that if you set it up correctly, and it's not that to say that you shouldn't do it in programmatic. We know it happens at the SSAI level, right? We know that's where it most commonly is occurring. The key is ensure you know where you have the opportunity or have those right PMPs in place, set yourself up for success, avoid as best as you humanly can where the technology is going to try to take over. And it's really that complement of the two. So you can't, again, technology is amazing. It allows us to do so many things, but the human factor has to be applied for it to be the most effective. And don't let your dollars get wasted, because seeing another one of these fraud schemes is it's unacceptable, but we know it's not unexpected. It's how do we get in front of it, and working with the partners like IES, Double Verify, Mo, Pixelate, working with them to make sure we're setting ourselves up for success and stop this from happening as forward as we can.
So
Yeah,
maybe,
it's about having
ahead.
open dialogue with your partners to that point.
so maybe if you could talk a little bit more about that, because I know all agencies and clients aren't the same. And it sounds to me like you're saying this will mirror the way conventional digital programmatic is bought and sold, where you have PMPs and direct guarantee deals with your favored nation vendors. And there'll also be a long tail out there where other, akin to open RTB versus PMPs in the display marketplace. Is that the way it's evolving? And are we going to see the big premium agencies and clients leaning into more direct deals, albeit done programmatically? Yeah.
I think it's going to be a combination of both, but I think in order to understand the value of an impression, you need to understand where that impression is being delivered. Is it, contextually relevant? Is it just an audience play? Is it, the right time, right audience, right person? Like what, all of those different factors need to come into play. And if you're just buying impressions at bulk, then, that's also like, if it doesn't matter, if you don't care where you go, as long as you get the value, then that's also a strategy. Like that is a pure investment strategy where it's just about the numbers. It's about the ROI, and I don't really care where I'm running. And that's okay. You just need to own it and then accept the responsibility that comes with that. Like, yeah, I ran wherever. I didn't it had my audience. I'm good. It's when, the challenge for us as agencies and as an industry is when things pivot or change and then, there's blame assigned. Like, well, yeah, I know I said I was okay with running in all those places, but I'm actually not anymore. That things go sideways.
Mhm.
Okay. So it looks like that part of the space will evolve over time, and you'll probably have your blacklists and whitelists of what is permissible for you and not. But I think the other point I was making is all boats will rise, because there will still be a long tail marketplace for those other suppliers of CTV inventory that don't pass muster with USIM and Mindshare and Dentsu. So there's a broader marketplace here. So let me ask you, we have a little more time for some questions and then we'll turn it over to the audience. But it sounds to me like what I heard from all of you is that you are buying it tactically, distinctly, as a part of an explicit CTV strategy, using the data, the ability to reach out to consumers, right time, right place, and all that stuff. But to what extent do you need to integrate it with a holistic TV video strategy? And how important is it for you to come up with a common unified metric? By that, I mean, SIM is going to have conferences tomorrow and the next day talking a lot about unified cross-platform measurement, things like that. Is that important to you? Or are you good enough? Because actually on the back end, you have much better data if you're doing a performance buy through CTV than you would with linear TV. Can you talk a little bit about how important and how the measurement of this will evolve?
Yeah, I would say that for us, unification is paramount. Just knowing that too, you don't know necessarily who is watching that CTV device at the end of the day, since it's on a household level. More so because we need to start incorporating mid-funnel engagement metrics as well. So before, there was this focus either on awareness or lower funnel tactics. But now, given the pandemic, that's flipped it upside on its head, because a lot of people are spending time at home. Some people go out and about, but we're changing our behavioral patterns, and we need to be succinct with how we're serving up those key messages on every platform. For us, for 2020, for Southeastern Grocers, for example, we were more focused on unifying our online strategy as a whole. But for 2021, we're pushing that envelope a little bit more to have an omni-channel approach to understanding how those channels are pushing foot traffic in store. And when we look at our tool for Purview, we're able to set up those sales trading zones for all the media channels that we're purchasing from, and then being able to see the viewability into what Southeastern Grocers customers are looking at on those CTV platforms. When we couple that, knowing the need states of the business to prove profitable outcomes, along with the tangibles of the engagement metrics that we're looking to elicit and moving those consumers down the funnel, that is how we start building our integrated approach. We're not necessarily focused on a single destination. We're on it for the journey to understand what it is that we want to learn, how quickly can we pivot, and what is it that our customers need from us the most. And the only way in my mind that you can do that is by creating an integrated approach, understanding how the context and the deliverability of the relevance, like we've talked about with Brad and Gibbs, is so paramount and important to that experience.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, everything's about interoperability and omni-channel approach. I mean, at the end of the day, but each tactic you're going to double click into and you're going to have an approach to it, right? We built a CTV playbook on how to approach it. Now it's going to pivot per the client, what their KPIs are and what they're looking to achieve. But what we're doing in CTV should be informed and enhanced by what we're doing in linear television, which is informed and enhanced what we're doing in social and search and across the board. I mean, it always starts with your audiences first. Where are they consuming? How do we want to reach them and what are we trying to achieve? But then how do the channels all work together? And of course, we have teams that are subject matter experts on how to navigate from one to the next. But ultimately, it's all about how does it come together to then be to ultimately understand how is this positively impacting our clients and is it actually achieving their KPIs? And then I love what you said. I mean, it's learn fast and pivot quick, right? Understand what's working, what's not, and then re-engage and then make those enhancements and optimizations. Because at the end of the day, CTV, it has a great place in your omni-channel strategy, but what does it make sense for a General Motors versus a Kroger versus a P&G? And it's going to be different from one client to the next.
Okay. Well, I know Nielsen's on the case, so in a couple of years, you'll have Nielsen one, and hopefully you'll be able to segment all of these different ways that you're touching that audience. I think, speaking of audience, we should check and see if any audience questions have arisen. And I'll be honest with my team, I don't know how to field those questions on this interface. So if anybody
here
else,
to help you, Joe.
thank you, Steve.
How you doing? A couple over the transom. One is about sort of just some general predictions about where the ad-supported CTV space will be by the end of the year, especially since we've seen a lot of players come in. We saw Peacock come in last year. We understand that HBO is developing an ad-supported version, and Fubo TV. It's starting to get cluttered. I'm curious if you guys have any predictions about what you expect to be a real growth property over the next year that you've especially got your eye on, and if you think there's going to be a shakeout soon.
Everything's going to grow. I mean, the reality is that there's a shift from linear TV. Linear TV continues to have ratings and content issues. It's going to be driven by the consumer, where the consumers pick what they want to engage with from a content standpoint. I think, one of the things that we miss is like this channel flipping, surfing opportunity. People don't watch channel guides. They don't go through channels. They don't surf through anymore. They find the show they want, then they're in, and then they're out. So I think that's going to be, I think, one of the challenges with the CTV space is going to be exclusivity. And what I mean by that is people need to have, consumers want content. And so if shared content or windowing across multiple platforms will make it harder to then drive long-term value in the CTV space. So, where Hulu is running on Roku and Roku serving ads into Tastemade or, into other platforms, that lack of exclusivity is not going to help growth of CTV. Like owning content and only being able to get it through one platform or one seller is going to be what creates that opportunity for long-term value in the CTV space.
I agree with that. I think a lot of providers are in a race to get their streaming businesses up and quickly because they see the need to, but they don't want to do it to completely demolish their lucrative TV businesses that they have. And to the point that Gibbs just made, I think content will always remain king. And the key thing about, AVOD content is that I want to be able to be in it for the long haul. I want to have a reason to keep coming back to see that show. And that content most times pushes the limits, right? From a production standpoint, from a topical standpoint, categories, et cetera. And so I think in order to get that and to get a great feeling out of it, you can't start nickeling and diming for every type of service out there, because then it loses its luster and what I'm willing to experience as a consumer.
Yeah, I mean, I spot on. I agree with everything. I mean, content is king, and that's going to be what's going to drive somebody to go from whether you're going to go to Pluto or if you're going to go to Zumo or if you're going to Peacock. It's the content you want to see, and the easiest way to get there. So that's going to be the core to who's going to win this and who can get into the originals game. We saw with Roku, acquiring Quibi's content for Roku channel. What is that going to look like? Is that the start? IMDb TV making originals, trying to really get their name out there and drive a destination, but with an ad-supported content. We know AVOD, SVOD, 45-55 split. Most SVOD consumers are not exclusive to just SVOD. Only 10% of SVOD consumers are only staying on one subscription services. So we know people are willing to go back and forth if the value proposition is there, and the value proposition is content. And that's what's going to drive the viewership.
We have a few more, pardon my reading these questions, but most people would prefer not to pipe in with their own audio questions. One question is, how are you going to manage reach and frequency effectively with CTV and video walled gardens?
Well, frequency, and I'll jump in first. I think frequency is a really interesting thing in the connected TV space, right? The first problem we had is everybody has the ability to access each other's inventory. That's just the reality of it. And do a deep dive into that, because if you can connect to an SSP, you can get to the inventory accordingly, or you can work directly with the device. You also splitting some of their inventory with the people that are having their apps on these devices. So just the sheer fact of that alone means that you have to have this crazy idea of just communication. Know where you have the opportunity to air. Gibbs brought up earlier, Melissa, we all talked. You have to know where you have the opportunity to air. Know where the crossover is on your list. And that's what's inevitably going to start by at least getting to manage your frequency from the beginning. Of course, you could bump it all into just one DSP, which would be great, and all, except for that actually give you the full opportunity to really understand the full breadth of measurement that can actually happen in that space. Because the reality is, Joe, you have a great Roku TCL behind you. That ACR can only be read by one partner that has that capability. Then there's other partners that also have the ACR, but that cannot overlap with that. So how you want to measure it to understand that true reach that you're garnering, combined with understand where you have the opportunity to air, that's how you're going to put that together. And there's obviously various different ways to do it. That's the interesting thing about what we're all saying here. It's not a one size fits all. There's multiple strategies in which you can bring this to life to inevitably get to that perfect reach and frequency management.
I think that's why a lot of marketers have been hesitant to put money into CTV. It's because they're used to wanting a one size fits all, especially during the pandemic when business isn't always riding as high. But now is the time to test with smaller budgets so that when the economy hopefully starts to boomerang back around and there's confidence in the vaccine, that you now are able to scale your efforts from these test pilot runs on CTV and how they fit into your omni-channel approach to solve for that, and knowing what the right balance is. And also, like we said earlier, scrutinizing your buys going in.
We have a complaint in the form of a question. CPMs are too high for CTV. At 10 to 20 times the CPMs for linear preemptible national cable, it does not pencil even with added targeting. When will CPMs come down to earth?
Yeah, I mean, please, Gibbs.
Yeah, CPMs are high. It is a better consumer viewing experience. It is a model that provides opportunity, engagement. People have chosen to lean into that. CPMs will come into earth, when you get scale. I mean, this is a supply and demand economic, marketplace. And by the way, if you want lower CPMs, we can go back and start buying fraudulent impressions. Like there is a mix into all of this, in that, value is, there is a cost associated with value. And, that, leave it at that.
Yeah, listen, I couldn't. It's supply and demand, and it's if you look at the last 3 years and the CPMs, they have been trending in the way that you would anticipate as the platforms have grown. I mean, you look at Roku a year or two ago is 26 million households, and now up to 52.3 million households across the US. And because of that, they have a lot more opportunity to sell impressions. When you do that, we anticipate when their costs are going to go. And that's how that is trending. And it is going to come in line, but it's going to be rooted in the value exchange, the premium content, and ultimately what is the opportunity to reach with however you're purchasing, whether it's with a device, whether it's programmatically. It's just how many people are out there for you to reach to get the CPMs where they need to be. TV is still a lot larger now. It's that simple.
I can't be the go-between in this, what's going on in the chat right now, which is arguing with you guys about whether they're really unavailable in the tour. There's really unavailable. In the tour. But let me get in one last question. Is P2 Plus really a targeted demo?
If you lay the targeting on top of it, no, I mean, P2 Plus is this mass awareness to all folks. So when I think about P2 Plus, it's a great base to understand where you have the total opportunity to reach, but it depends on what your goals and KPIs are for the campaign. If you want to overlay your audiences, you can start with 2 Plus to know then who you're actually trying to reach and really focus in on the core audiences you're ultimately reaching. But again, each advertiser could be different. You know, I think Gibbs brought up really well earlier and just saying that if you're the advertiser that just really wants to get that efficiencies and really get your messaging out there, that's a great metric to be trading off of. But ultimately, if you're looking to really take advantage of the targeting capabilities that come with it, it's a great screen to really get further down that funnel.
Well, that's it, Brad, Melissa, Gibbs, and of course, Joe, as always, thank you so much for this. This was great. And if you guys want to stick around, go into the chat room because I think people want to argue with you there.
Healthy debate.
Healthy
Thanks,
debate.
everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, y'all. It was great.
Bye.